If you're watching this video right now, share where you're watching from, because you're about to witness a story that proves how a simple act of kindness can change someone's entire world. When Shaquille O'Neal walked into that small shoe store in Atlanta one Tuesday afternoon, David Martinez was too busy organizing the stockroom to notice. The 17-year-old had been working extra shifts, trying to save enough money for his senior prom, but the numbers just weren't adding up. David's story wasn't unusual in his neighborhood. His mother, Anna Martinez, had been raising him and his two younger sisters alone since their father passed away 3 years ago. She worked as a nurse's aide during the day and cleaned offices at night, but even with both jobs, there was barely enough to cover the basics. David had taken the job at the shoe store 6 months ago, determined to help with the household expenses while maintaining his 3.8 GPA. The store manager, Robert Taylor, had watched David work tirelessly, never complaining even when he had to miss basketball practice to cover an extra shift. Robert knew the boy's situation all too well. He'd grown up in similar circumstances, which was why he'd hired David in the first place. What he didn't know was that his casual conversation with Shaquille O'Neal that day would set in motion a chain of events that would change David's life forever. That afternoon had started like any other. David was organizing boxes in the stockroom, his college acceptance letter tucked safely in his backpack. Georgia State University had said yes, but the scholarship only covered tuition. Books, housing, and other expenses loomed like insurmountable mountains. For now, though, his more immediate concern was prom. His date, Rachel Santos, had been understanding about his financial situation, even offering to skip the event entirely, but David was determined to give her the night she deserved. The bell above the store entrance chimed, and Robert's voice carried through to the stockroom. "David, I need you out here." When David emerged, carrying a stack of shoeboxes, he nearly dropped them at the sight of the NBA legend standing at the counter. At 7 feet 1 inch, Shaquille O'Neal's presence was impossible to ignore, but it was his warm smile that caught David off guard. "Need some help with those?" Shaq asked, already reaching for the wobbling tower of boxes. David stammered a thank you, still trying to process that one of his childhood heroes was standing in front of him. What he didn't know was that Shaq had already been in the store for 15 minutes, talking with Robert about the hardworking kid who never missed a shift. As David helped Shaq look for shoes in his size, no small task given his famous size 22 feet, they started talking. Shaq had a way of putting people at ease, asking about school, family, and future plans. Before long, David found himself opening up about his dreams of becoming a pediatrician, inspired by the doctors who had cared for his father during his illness. Full ride to Georgia State, David mentioned proudly when Shaq asked about college. But there's still a lot to figure out. He didn't elaborate, but Shaq, who had grown up with his own share of financial challenges, recognized the weight in those words. The conversation shifted to basketball, and David's eyes lit up as he talked about his team's recent games. "Used to play point guard," he explained, "but had to quit when I started working here." He tried to keep the regret out of his voice, but Shaq, ever perceptive, caught it. What David didn't know was that his guidance counselor, Ms. Williams, had recently reached out to several community organizations about his situation. She had watched him maintain his grades while working nearly full-time hours, never asking for help but clearly needing it. Her letter had made its way to the Shaq Foundation, arriving just days before this chance encounter. As Shaq tried on different shoes, he casually asked about prom. David's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "It's coming up," he said, focusing intently on checking the fit of the shoes. "Should be fun." The forced enthusiasm in his voice didn't match the worry in his eyes. Robert, who had been watching the interaction, quietly filled Shaq in on the details. The prom ticket itself was $75, but that was just the beginning. Suit rental, corsage, dinner, it all added up to more than David could manage while helping with household expenses. He'd been putting aside a little from each paycheck, but at this rate, he wouldn't have enough in time. What happened next seemed like a scene from a movie. Shaq, having selected several pairs of shoes, asked David to ring him up. As David calculated the total, Shaq noticed the college brochure peeking out of the boy's backpack. "Georgia State," he commented. "Good school. You know, I went back to school after the NBA to get my doctorate." Education changes everything. David's eyes widened. He knew about Shaq's basketball career, but hearing about his educational achievements added a new dimension to his hero. "That's amazing," he said softly. "I hope I can make it through med school someday." As David finished the transaction, Shaq pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Hey, I'm at City Sneakers on Peachtree. There's someone here you need to meet." Within minutes, a camera crew arrived, part of Shaq's reality show team that had been filming his community work. David's mother, who had just finished her day shift at the nursing home, received a call from Robert asking her to come to the store immediately. When she arrived, still in her medical scrubs, she found her son standing next to Shaquille O'Neal, both of them grinning like they shared a secret. Rachel Santos, who worked at the coffee shop next door, had wandered over during her break, drawn by the commotion. She stood in the doorway, watching as Shaq pulled out not just a credit card for the shoes, but a separate envelope that would change everything. If you're still watching, drop a comment below about a time when someone's kindness caught you completely by surprise. Because what Shaq did next left everyone in that small shoe store speechless, and proved that sometimes the biggest hearts come in the biggest packages. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where this story takes a turn that nobody, especially David Martinez, could have expected. The envelope in Shaquille O'Neal's hands contained more than just money. It held dreams, possibilities, and a future that David Martinez had only dared to imagine. But Shaq, with his characteristic smile, wasn't ready to reveal everything just yet. He had learned long ago that sometimes the greatest gifts need to be unveiled gradually, allowing their full impact to sink in. First things first, Shaq announced to the growing crowd in the small shoe store. "Let's talk about prom." He turned to David, who was still trying to process the presence of NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal and a full camera crew in his workplace. "I hear you've been working extra shifts to afford it?" David glanced at his mother, Anna, who stood nearby still in her medical scrubs, her eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and concern. "Yes, sir," he replied. "Just trying to make it work." The humility in his voice touched everyone in the room. Robert Taylor, the store manager, had seen David turn down extra break time, stay late without complaint, and never once mention his struggles to customers. Now, watching the scene unfold, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the universe had a way of recognizing quiet determination. Rachel Santos had moved closer, her coffee shop apron still on, curiosity written across her face. She and David had been planning to skip the fancy pre-prom dinner, maybe grab something simple before heading to the dance. She had insisted she didn't mind, but David's determination to give her a proper prom experience was just one of the many reasons she had fallen for him. Shaq reached into the envelope and pulled out several gift cards. "Let's see, we've got Men's Warehouse for a proper suit, not a rental, your own suit." He handed the first card to David, whose hands trembled slightly as he accepted it. "Then there's one for the florist down on Main Street. My friend Tony owns it, he'll take good care of you." But the NBA legend was just getting started. "Now about dinner." He pulled out another card, this one for La Maison, one of Atlanta's finest restaurants. "They're expecting you and Rachel at 6 p.m. on prom night. Private table, everything taken care of." Rachel's gasp was audible, even over the whirring of the camera equipment. Ms. Williams, who had just arrived after receiving a cryptic text from Robert, watched from near the door. She had written countless letters seeking help for students in need, but seeing one bear fruit in such a spectacular way made all those late nights worth it. Anna Martinez had moved closer to her son, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. She had raised him to be proud but never arrogant, to work hard but never complain. Watching him accept these gifts with genuine gratitude and humility made her heart swell. "But here's the thing," Shaq continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I heard something else about you, David. Something that impressed me more than your work ethic or your grades." He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. "I heard about what you do with your tip money." David looked down, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. Robert spoke up, filling the silence. "He splits it 3 ways, the manager explained. Part for prom, part for college expenses, and part for his sister's school supplies." Shaq nodded approvingly. "See, that's what caught my attention. A lot of kids your age would keep it all for themselves. But you're thinking about others, even when you barely have enough for yourself. He reached back into the envelope. That's why we're not stopping at prom. The next item he pulled out wasn't a gift card, it was a letter. The Shaq Foundation has a scholarship program, he explained. Full ride doesn't always mean fully covered. Books, housing, meal plans, it all adds up. He handed the letter to David. This covers everything Georgia State doesn't. All 4 years. The silence in the store was broken only by Anna's quiet sob. David, still holding the letter with trembling hands, tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Rachel had moved closer, reading over his shoulder, her free hand clasped over her mouth in surprise. But Shaq wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, his smile growing wider. "You mentioned you had to quit basketball to work here." He pulled out another document. "How'd you like to play again? Georgia State's coach is a friend of mine. He's agreed to let you try out for the team. Not promising a spot, but promising a fair shot." David's eyes lit up in a way his mother hadn't seen since before his father passed away. Basketball had been their thing, countless hours in the driveway, his father teaching him the fundamentals even while battling his illness. The sport had become too painful after the loss, the memories too raw, but now. "There's just one condition," Shaq added, his voice serious but his eyes twinkling. "You have to let me teach you my free throw technique." The joke broke the emotional tension, causing everyone to laugh. Even David cracked a smile, knowing Shaq's infamous struggles at the free throw line were part of NBA legend. Ms. Williams stepped forward, her teacher's instincts kicking in. "This is incredible," she said, "but don't forget, you still need to maintain your grades for the scholarship." David nodded earnestly. "I won't let you down, ma'am. Any of you." Rachel, who had been quietly absorbing everything, suddenly remembered something. "But what about your job here? The store needs you and your family." She trailed off, not wanting to overstep. Shaq's smile grew even wider. "Already taken care of. Robert here has agreed to keep David's job open for summer breaks and holidays. And as for family expenses," he turned to Anna. "Mrs. Martinez, check your email. The hospital where you work has a scholarship program for employees' children. Funny thing, they just received an anonymous donation specifically for nursing assistants pursuing additional education." Anna's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what this meant. She had dreamed of becoming a registered nurse but couldn't afford the courses while supporting 3 children. Now that dream suddenly seemed possible. Robert, watching all of this unfold, spoke up. "David, why don't you take the rest of the day off? I think you and your family have some planning to do." But before David could leave, Shaq had one more surprise. "Almost forgot," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Can't have you missing any more basketball practices." He pulled out a set of keys. "There's a used Honda Civic parked outside. Nothing fancy but reliable. Should get you to school, practice, and maybe take Rachel on a proper date now and then." The cameras captured it all, the tears, the hugs, the shocked expressions. But they also captured something more subtle, the moment a young man realized that his hard work and character had been seen, acknowledged, and rewarded in ways he never expected. If you're still watching, drop a comment below about someone who changed your life with an act of kindness. Because what happened in that small shoe store wasn't just about prom or scholarships or even basketball. It was about hope, about community, and about the ripple effects that one person's generosity can create. Stay tuned for Chapter 3, where we'll see how this extraordinary day continues to unfold, and how Shaquille O'Neal's generosity extends far beyond what anyone in that store could have imagined. News travels fast in close-knit communities, and by the time David Martinez pulled his new Honda Civic into his family's apartment complex, the story of Shaquille O'Neal's visit to City Sneakers had spread throughout the neighborhood. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the greatest impact of kindness isn't in the initial act, but in the way it inspires others to action. Carlos Rivera, David's neighbor and fellow senior at East Atlanta High, was sitting on his front steps when the Martinez family arrived home. He watched as David helped his mother, Anna, carry in several bags, the suit, the prom accessories, and various other gifts from Shaq's spontaneous shopping spree. But it wasn't the packages that caught Carlos's attention, it was the look of renewed hope on their faces. Inside their apartment, David's younger sisters, Elena and Sophia, couldn't contain their excitement. The new school supplies Shaq had insisted on buying them gleamed on the kitchen table: pristine notebooks, quality backpacks, and even the scientific calculator Elena had been trying to save up for. But it was the change in their brother that truly amazed them. For the first time since their father's passing, he was talking about basketball again. Ms. Williams, who had followed the family home to help process all the paperwork for the scholarships, sat at the kitchen table with Anna. "This isn't just about David," she explained, showing Anna the details of the nursing program scholarship. Shaq understood that supporting one member of a family means supporting them all. The news had reached Principal Thompson at East Atlanta High, who immediately called an emergency staff meeting. "We have 43 seniors in similar situations," he told his assembled teachers. "Maybe we can't help them all like Shaq helped David, but we can certainly do more than we're doing now." Rachel Santos had returned to the coffee shop next door to City Sneakers, but her mind wasn't on making lattes. The other baristas noticed her distraction, the way she kept glancing at the prom dress website on her phone. Her manager, Maria Chin, finally pulled her aside. "Tell me about this dress you're looking at," she said with a knowing smile. Back at City Sneakers, Robert Taylor was dealing with an unexpected surge of customers. Word of Shaq's visit had drawn people to the store, but they weren't just coming to see where it happened. They were coming with questions about David, about his story, about how they could help other kids in similar situations. Jason Kim, owner of the formal wear shop across the mall, walked into City Sneakers with a proposition. "I heard about what Shaq did," he told Robert. "Got me thinking. I've got 30 tuxedos from last season that I was going to send back to the manufacturer. What if instead, we found 30 kids who need them for prom?" The local news had picked up the story, focusing not just on Shaq's generosity but on the broader issues it highlighted. Reporter Sarah Mitchell interviewed Ms. Williams about the challenges facing students like David. "It's not just about prom," the guidance counselor explained. "It's about young people having to choose between their education and helping their families survive." David's story had particularly resonated with Marcus Johnson, a successful real estate developer who had grown up in the same neighborhood. He arrived at East Atlanta High the next morning with a proposal for Principal Thompson. "I want to start a scholarship fund," he said. "Not just for college, but for all the expenses that full rides don't cover. Let's help 20 kids this year." The ripple effects continued to spread. Local businesses began reaching out to the school, offering part-time jobs with flexible schedules that wouldn't interfere with studies. The owner of La Maison, inspired by Shaq's dinner reservation for David and Rachel, decided to offer free prom night dinners to 10 other couples who couldn't afford it. Meanwhile, David was discovering that Shaq's mentorship extended beyond that one afternoon. The NBA legend had given him his personal phone number, telling him to call anytime. "Success isn't just about opportunities," Shaq had told him. "It's about having someone to talk to when things get tough." That guidance proved invaluable when David arrived at Georgia State's basketball tryouts. The other players were intimidated at first, not by David's skills, but by the fact that Shaquille O'Neal himself had vouched for him. Coach Parker pulled David aside. "Shaq told me about your story," he said. "But here you make your own way. Show me what you've got." Anna Martinez's transformation was equally remarkable. With the burden of David's college expenses lifted and the nursing program scholarship secured, she was able to reduce her second job to part-time. This meant more time with her daughters, helping with homework, and finally pursuing her own dreams of advancing in the medical field. The local community center, inspired by the story, started a new program called Beyond the Game, combining academic tutoring with basketball training. They asked David to speak at the launch event, where he shared his story of balancing work, school, and family responsibilities. The kids in the audience saw themselves in him, and more importantly, saw what was possible. Rachel's manager at the coffee shop, Maria Chin, had another surprise in store. She had contacted her sister, who owned a boutique in downtown Atlanta. Together, they arranged for Rachel to have her dream prom dress at no cost. "When one person shows kindness," Maria explained, "it makes others want to do the same." But perhaps the most touching response came from Carlos Rivera and his friends. They had started a small fund at school, with students contributing whatever they could afford, even if it was just $1, to help their classmates with prom expenses. "We may not be Shaq," Carlos said, "but we can still make a difference." The local newspaper ran a follow-up story titled "Beyond the Gift: How One Act of Kindness Transformed a Community." It detailed not just Shaq's generosity, but the wave of community support it had inspired. Business owners, teachers, and students were all finding ways to help each other, creating a network of support that promised to last long after prom night. Principal Thompson summed it up best during a school assembly: "What Shaquille O'Neal did for David Martinez was extraordinary. But what's even more extraordinary is how this community has responded. We're not just helping kids get to prom or college, we're showing them that their dreams matter, that their hard work is seen, and that they're not alone." If you're still watching, leave a comment about how one act of kindness inspired others in your community. Because while Shaq's gesture was incredible, the real magic happened in the way it awakened the generosity in others. And stay tuned for the final chapter, where we'll see how all these acts of kindness come together on one unforgettable prom night. On the evening of East Atlanta High's senior prom, the transformation wasn't just in the decorations that filled the hotel ballroom or the dressed-up students arriving in their finest, it was in the spirit of the community that had come together in ways no one could have predicted just a few weeks ago. And it all started because Shaquille O'Neal had walked into a small shoe store and recognized something special in a hardworking teenager. David Martinez stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the tie of his new suit. The reflection showed more than just a young man dressed for prom. It showed someone who had learned that dreams don't always have to be deferred. His father's old cufflinks, carefully preserved since his passing, completed the outfit. Anna Martinez watched from the doorway, remembering how her late husband had always said their son was destined for great things. What the Martinez family didn't know was that Shaq had one more surprise planned for the evening. The NBA legend had been keeping in touch with Robert Taylor from the shoe store, coordinating something special not just for David, but for all the seniors who had struggled to afford their prom night. Rachel Santos was getting ready at her house, where Maria Chin from the coffee shop and her sister had helped her prepare. The prom dress they had gifted her was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined, a deep blue gown that seemed to catch every light. But it was the card that came with it that brought tears to her eyes, because kindness looks beautiful on everyone. At the La Maison restaurant, the staff was preparing for their special prom night service. What had started as one free dinner for David and Rachel had expanded to accommodate 15 couples, thanks to the owner's growing commitment to the community. Each table was set with the same care and attention as their highest-paying customers would receive. Principal Thompson stood in the hotel ballroom, supervising the final decorations. The theme was a night of stars, but it had taken on new meaning. Local businesses had donated additional decorations, creating an atmosphere that rivaled any professional event. The principal smiled, remembering how just weeks ago, they had been worried about having enough funds for basic decorations. Carlos Rivera and his friends had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations with their student fund. What started as a small collection had grown into enough to help 20 students with their prom expenses. Local news crews were setting up to cover the story, not just because of Shaq's involvement, but because of how the community had rallied together. Ms. Williams arrived early to the ballroom, carrying a special guest book. Inside were messages from everyone who had contributed to making this night possible, from Shaq's original note to messages from local business owners, teachers, and community members who had been inspired to help. It would become a testament to what can happen when kindness sparks a movement. At exactly 6 p.m., David pulled up to Rachel's house in his Honda Civic, which he had spent the entire previous day cleaning and detailing. The corsage he carried came from Tony's flower shop, where the owner had not only honored Shaq's gift card but had added extra flowers, because every love story deserves something special. What happened next would be talked about in East Atlanta for years to come. As David and Rachel arrived at La Maison, they found not just their private table, but Shaquille O'Neal himself waiting to greet them and the other couples who had been helped by the community's generosity. "I told you success isn't just about opportunities," Shaq said, addressing all the students. "It's about community." It's about people coming together to lift each other up. He had arranged for a professional photographer to capture the evening, ensuring that every student would have lasting memories of their special night. The dinner was more than just a meal, it was a celebration of resilience and community spirit. David listened as other students shared their stories, realizing that his experience had helped others feel comfortable talking about their own struggles and dreams. When they arrived at the prom venue, the transformation was complete. The hotel ballroom sparkled with thousands of lights, creating an atmosphere of magic and possibility. But the real magic was in the faces of the students who had thought they might miss this milestone moment. Principal Thompson took to the stage to make an announcement that left everyone speechless. The scholarship fund started by Marcus Johnson had exceeded its initial goal. Instead of 20 students, they would be able to help 35 seniors with their college expenses. The cheers that erupted were deafening. But Shaq wasn't done yet. Through a video message played on the ballroom screens, he announced a new annual program, the Believe in Dreams Foundation, which would help students at East Atlanta High and other schools in similar situations. What happened here isn't just about one night or one student, he said. It's about showing that when we believe in dreams, anything is possible. David and Rachel shared their first dance as, at last, played through the ballroom speakers. Around them, other couples swayed to the music, including Carlos and his date, who had been helped by the student fund he had started. The night was everything they had hoped for and more. Anna Martinez, who had been invited to help chaperone, watched her son with tears in her eyes. Just that morning, she had completed her registration for nursing classes. The ripple effects of Shaq's kindness had truly transformed their entire family's future. As the evening progressed, more surprises were revealed. Local colleges had heard about the community's efforts and had sent representatives to discuss scholarship opportunities. Business owners who had contributed to the prom fund were offering summer internships. The night had become more than a celebration. It had become a launching pad for futures that once seemed out of reach. Near midnight, as the prom was winding down, David stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. His phone buzzed with a text from Shaq. "Proud of you, young man. Remember, success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you inspire along the way." Looking back at the ballroom, David could see through the windows as his classmates enjoyed their final dances of the evening. Carlos was collecting last-minute donations for next year's student fund. Rachel was talking with Ms. Williams about the college preparation program they were planning to start. The seeds of kindness planted by one NBA legend had grown into a forest of opportunity. If you're watching this video, take a moment to think about the power of kindness to transform not just one life, but an entire community. Drop a comment below sharing how you plan to create your own ripple effect of generosity. Because what happened at East Atlanta High didn't end with prom night, it was just the beginning of a movement that would continue to change lives for years to come. Like and subscribe if you believe in the power of community and kindness. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the biggest dreams start with a small act of generosity. Because in the end, it's not just about Shaquille O'Neal's incredible gift, it's about how that gift awakened the generosity in an entire community and showed that when we come together, no dream is too big to achieve.